Hello and welcome to the Yoga Corner. I'm Shelby Phoenix. I'm a yoga instructor, life coach, and founder of the Yoga Corner. I help you find unshakable self-trust and manifest a lifestyle as a yoga entrepreneur. In my podcast, Yoga Corner Chats, I have real conversations with women about their wellness and entrepreneurship journeys. So get cozy and listen in because the next chat is starting now. Hello everyone. I am so excited to, in a moment, introduce you to Maddie Janes. We are going to talk about all things yoga and really about her story about yoga and her chronic illness and her vision to create a space that really centers other people who have chronic illness. And supports them in a compassionate and inclusive way. Before we get started, I just wanted to say that I'm still working on the Wi-Fi issue that is contributing to the lag you're hearing in the audio. I am getting something in the mail from Amazon that should fix this problem. So fingers crossed, but we are learning as we go. And one more thing I wanted to remind you about before we start this episode is that I am currently accepting clients into my 6-month one-on-one entrepreneurship mindset coaching program for yoga teachers. If this is something you're interested in, send me an email or Instagram message and we'll set up a clarity call. Please don't forget to give this podcast a review and subscribe so that you don't miss out on future episodes. And we'll get started right now. Welcome to the Yoga Corner. I am Shelby Phoenix, and I am a yoga instructor, life coach, and owner of the Yoga Corner. I help you find unshakable self-trust and manifest a lifestyle as a yoga entrepreneur. Today on the Yoga Corner, we will be joined by Maddie Janes. Maddie is a chronically ill yoga practitioner and psychology student navigating life with chronic illness, trying to make yoga more accessible for people like herself. I am so excited to have Maddie on Yoga Corner Chats. We met on Instagram, and I was really inspired by her vision to create a space that centers people with chronic illness that is compassionate and inclusive. Hi, Maddie.
Hi.
Welcome. So, before we dive into the interview, would you mind if we took a couple of deep breaths together? Awesome. And anyone who's listening, I see Suzanne in there. I invite you to join us in a couple of deep breaths as well. So settle into wherever you're sitting. Close your eyes or take a soft gaze. Roll your shoulders up to your ears and then let them fall down your back. Take a deep inhale through your nose, fill all the way up to your crown chakra. And then sigh out your mouth. We'll take 2 more deep breaths like that. Inhale through the nose, fill up all the way to the top. And let it go. One more time. Biggest breath of the day so far. Inhale, fill up. And let it all go. And whenever you feel ready to open your eyes and come back into this space. So, Maddie, how are you doing
I'm good,
today?
thank you. How are you?
I am doing so well. I'm really glad we got to have this chat, and I really appreciate you for taking the time to be on
that
today.
You invited me.
Share with us, where are you in the world?
Kind of in the middle. I'm in Warwickshire, so where close to where Shakespeare was born. Is like the easiest way to describe.
So, I would love to begin by giving you the opportunity to introduce yourself and maybe share a little bit about your journey to becoming a yoga teacher.
I live with chronic illness, and a rare chronic condition. And I trained to become a yoga teacher and qualified. I started my teacher training in the summer of 2021, and then I qualified in the summer of 2022. So I'm quite a new teacher. I remember when I first connected with you, I hadn't finished yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of crazy.
Congratulations. So
you.
excited for you. And I've noticed you have been teaching some classes online.
Yeah. So it
How's
went
that
well.
been
Um, I know you'll know from when you started, like those nerves when you teach your first class. But yeah, it's definitely been a learning experience. And I'm taking a little break at the moment because I'm also studying for a undergrad psychology degree. So I'm kind of juggling both at the same time.
That's amazing. You're so young and you've
Yeah, I
accomplished
don't
so
feel,
much.
I get that quite a lot. Like, I was just talking to someone yesterday who I said, oh, how old do you think I am? And she said like 26, 27, but I turn 24 next week. So, yeah.
Happy birthday. So I'm wondering if you would feel comfortable sharing a bit about your chronic illness and how it's impacted your life
Yeah,
and your
so
yoga practice.
I'll try and keep it short because it's quite a long, there's a long backstory, but so I feel like I've experienced chronic pain for a long time, like probably started when I was like 11. So I've always had the label, I felt like at school I always had the label as like the sick one. Or, I don't know what the American word would be for it, but like they'd say like, oh, you're skiving, so like you're skipping school. Yeah, when
Like
I
skipping
would just be
school.
ill a lot. And I suffered from like really chronic period pains. Then I finished GC, like our kind of exams at like 15, 16. I went on my summer holiday and it was all like fun. And then I started suffering from extreme pain and non-stop all night. And then gradually over the month it got worse to the point where I was like blacking out, being sick. I couldn't really walk, like it was really bad. And I went to hospital probably like four times. And they sent me away. They were like, it's anxiety, you're stressed, you're a young teenage girl, you know, you're just getting worked up, that kind of thing. And then they found out eventually, like long story short, that I have a very, very rare uterine condition. So I've been born with two uteruses, two wombs. So I'd never heard of that before, but it turns out that like there's, I think it's like 1 in 2,000 maybe. And yeah, so one of my wounds, the pain was that every time I'd had a period, one of my cervix, so I have two cervixes as well, was blocked. So every time I had a period over like from 12 to 16, it would fill up, but it didn't have anywhere to go. So I had my first surgery was like what I would call like a C-section, like you'd have if you're gonna have a baby, to drain the blood.
Right.
And then I remember the day that I was having surgery, or the day that I was in hospital and I had like tubes everywhere, was the day that all of my friends started like what I think would be like the equivalent to like your senior year or something, like a big, yeah. So that was my first experience of, I guess, like chronic illness. I had to take a year off of school to have more surgery and recover from that. And then that's when my kind of dipped my toe into like the I want to say back then it was more like the fitness and that kind of realm rather than like wellness and yoga and that stuff kind of came later.
Right.
But it was all, it was
Yeah.
like the stepping stones for it. And then,
Right.
so I recovered from that and like started this journey of really getting into like, okay, I need to look after my body. I found, because as
Mm,
well as the wounds, I had found out I'd been born without my left kidney. Um, so that kind of to me was like, I really need to look after myself. Um, so
right.
I would I would work out a lot, but it was I don't think it was yoga at that point. And then I tried going back to school, but at this point I was a year older than everyone that I was with.
Hmm.
So I did that for a while, but then I remember constantly. I think school starts in September here, so I started in September, and then November I got ill and I was admitted to hospital again, and it was constant kind of like get well, fall sick with something again, and then get. So I came
Yeah.
back in December and I kind of thought, actually, school, this isn't for me. I want to leave. I left,
Yeah.
and then in the new year, I decided to just get a job. And then this is when I started really getting into um, like health and fitness, and like to the point where I did develop probably an unhealthy relationship with it because it
Right.
went like the other way, like going to the gym a lot, etc. And then I realized after a few months that working environment was very, I was only 18 at the time, and it was very toxic, very, I was the only girl working in this small office, men, and they weren't
Mm,
necessarily older men, they were all kind of like, I think one was like 20, 21, etc. But it was just not,
yeah.
it wasn't a nice environment. And I'd gotten so into health and fitness that I thought um, I wanted to do something with this. So I looked at local colleges and courses I could do and decided to go and study sports. So then at this point is when I start getting into yoga because I'm going to the gym regularly, but I'm going to like what I know now is not yoga. At the time, I was
Yeah.
like, I'm going to
Right.
do a yoga class, but it was like yoga
Right.
fused with Pilates and other things.
Right.
But I was really into it. And a few years earlier, actually, my cousin had done her yoga teacher training. And I remember being fascinated and just being like, wanting to know everything about it and um, asking her to give me like private lessons and things like that and thinking like, oh, I'd love to do that one day. But I thought like, I'll do it when like, I
Right.
don't know, I'm 30 and I'm like settled down and I'm like in a job because I always knew how expensive they were and that like,
Right.
I don't know, you have to go off to some exotic place for like 10 days and do an intensive teacher training. So I thought that's in
Right.
far off. So I start studying sports, and everyone else had like you had to have a your sport, but I wasn't really doing the course for kind of sports as such. I was into like probably like the sports psychology, the health side of it, rather than like sports coaching and stuff like that. And so other
Right.
people had to like teach a plan a lesson and it had to be filmed and you had to teach the rest of the class. So while everyone else was doing like football, hockey, and I was like, can I teach a yoga class? um, and I remember at the time as well,
Yeah.
I don't think it was a massive thing. Like yoga was a thing over here, but it wasn't kind of what it is now. So I remember kind of my classmates
Right.
kind of being a bit like, okay. But they all enjoyed it. And also, again, I always find it, because I find this like even now, even having a chronic illness with people who are able bodied and fit and healthy, how they just, there's still this underestimation of how difficult yoga can be.
I see
People
that a
think, oh,
lot
it's
as
just
well.
stretching. I'm like, no. So I
That
think
you're
like a
behind.
lot of the boys on the course were a bit like, oh, that's easy, we can do that. And they were kind of surprised.
Right.
And then there was another time as well, and I think you'll like this because of what you do, is we had like a primary school of young kids, like 6 to 7, come in. And we also had to plan a class and teach them. So everyone else did kind of like fun games and stuff. But I wanted to teach them yoga. So, and I remember these little like 6-year-olds kind of, there were some really confident 6-year-old boys who thought like, what is yoga? This is silly, this is girl stuff, etc. And then I did this sort of basic sequence and they were so in it. And I remember my teacher just like loving it. So I can remember that even then thinking like, this is definitely something I want to do one day. I think if anything they like seeing what you do with your middle school teaching and things like that is just like start them young, like because it's just like it's a tool if anything. So like why not have that tool from a young age? And anyway, so then I had done my sports course for a year. It was a 2-year course, and at the end of it, you would have enough to go to university. But in that summer, I started, and at this point, I was going to the gym like 5, 6 times a week, doing very intense workouts, and that's alongside studying sports. And I started noticing these lumps on my legs, and because I was so active, I thought, oh, they're just because they look like bruises. So I thought, oh, I'm just, I'm active, I'm bruising myself, etc. Yeah.
Bumping into things.
And I remember being in like the changing rooms with the girls and being like, what do you think of these? And then they'd kind of get bigger, and I remember they'd be swollen as well. And then I remember getting one on my ankle that it would get bigger and bigger, and it got so bad to the point where I couldn't walk on my foot or anything. And I remember going to the doctor and her kind of freaking out and being like, I don't know what this is, but you're definitely going to hospital, like it could be bone cancer or something like that. Scary stuff. And then there was another, I feel like every time I get ill, I'm very used to being labelled like, we don't know what's wrong with you. It was that cycle again. So yeah,
Like it's anxiety, it's in your head. Go take a nap.
Or like just rest and it will go away or whatever. So eventually I found out it was some kind of very rare like tissue thing, but I basically never recovered from it because then it turned like the lumps went away, but then I'd go to the gym and I'd go on the treadmill, and I'd finish and I'd have like, I don't know if you've ever had like tonsillitis or glandular fever, which like here, and you feel like, and then I would do exercise and then I would feel like I was getting the flu, but it never did. So it was like I never recovered. And then I was diagnosed with ME or chronic fatigue syndrome. And then I had to leave my sports course because it then got so bad to the point where I was in a wheelchair, I couldn't get out of bed, that kind of thing. So it was another kind of get well, start something, and then like the cycle. So I feel like and before then, I was thinking about this morning, is I did fall out of love for a while with probably the physical practice of yoga, if I reflect on it, but the one thing that has been with me longer is meditation. Is I remember that summer kind of being so obsessed with it that I would like if friends came round, I'd be like, can we meditate together? And be doing it like every day for at least 20 minutes. And when I think back, that's the practice that's definitely almost been with me longer. And probably
Yeah.
helped me during like the up and down time, because
Right.
after then I think it was hard then for me to come. It's taken me a while before then doing my teacher training to get back into a good place with yoga, because I didn't feel like it was something I could do as someone with, like, I didn't know what ME was, so it was kind of like learning, oh, okay, what's this illness I've got?
Right.
And I had this idea in my head of what yoga was before from what I'd experienced it. And obviously that's not
Right.
what we know it as. So
Right.
yeah, it was quite a bit of a long backstory, but yeah.
Well, I'm so glad that you shared all of that with us. Thank you for being vulnerable. And there was one thing I wanted to ask you about your journey. You talked about it a little bit, but I did read your website before this interview, and you share on your website about how you felt this feeling of betrayal and resentment and grief, and how that made it really like challenging for you to
Mm.
sit and go inward, um with your like fatigue and the pain and that cycle you're going through. So can you share about how you were able to transform that into the vision you're
Yeah.
creating today?
So I feel like in the yoga and wellness space, and if you don't experience chronic pain or chronic illness, and then on top of that, I have anxiety disorder and like mental health and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, when you kind of sit down, like when you become chronically ill, a lot of the time, then other people who aren't ill, upon hearing that maybe you've got this condition or something, they there's a common thing where it then feels like they feel like they can give unsolicited advice of, oh, you try this and this will heal you, this will help you. And a lot of the time it is, oh, you should meditate and you should do yoga because, you know, it'll miraculously kind of change your life. But when you tell someone who is in like chronic pain all day, every day, to sit down and just kind of breathe, or someone who's highly anxious, the last thing they want to do is kind of go
Mm,
inwards and just be lying there kind of
right.
feeling everything, when that's them all day every day. With my anxiety, the last thing I would want to do is sit and focus on my breath, because that's the thing that's like shallow, and I'm the more I like, for me, the more I focus on it, the worse it gets. So
Yeah.
it is really hard to, especially in the space, because I couldn't go to a yoga class. Finding people online who could I could relate to, or could give me kind of what I needed then, because the other thing is with chronic illness, it changes so much, that kind of like
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
I was when I was first diagnosed is completely different to where I am now. But other people
Right.
I know are kind of remind me of when I was there, or other people are way further along their healing journey than I am. But it's just, um,
Yeah.
I don't really know how. I just knew that there was something deeper than the physical with yoga. I like so the pull to actually do my teacher training was because I knew there was more, and I knew that could help
Yeah.
me more and other people more than what we were kind of being fed is yoga, like on Instagram and things like that. And that I
Right.
think is what's helped me the most with my chronic illness. So like, um, I think people who don't know yoga, or who think of it just as like exercise or something or movement. If I say, oh,
Right.
I'm practicing yoga, I would say my yoga practice is like 75% not physical because of my chronic illness. And actually, the practices that I do and I'm able to do every day is not the physical thing that we associate with yoga. And I think it's like wanting to share that with other people. Also, just like it's a very lonely place to be when you're when you have something wrong with your health, and you feel different as well. Like you can't none of my friends have experienced something like this, so you can talk to them. It's like talking to someone, like we can talk about yoga on like a deeper level that maybe I could talk about it with like someone who isn't so into it, whereas it's the same with like chronic illness. So yeah, I don't know if that's actually answered your question.
No, it did. I can empathize on a small level just because I have mental disorders as well, and I have heard other yoga practitioners say things like, you don't need medication, just go take a walk. And that's probably well intentioned, but like you said, it's a tool, not a cure.
I do find like this kind of, I have a lot of ickiness around a lot of stuff that's either like in the wellness community online, but also I found a lot of things in the chronic illness community for a while very difficult because they're kind of similar. So it'd be people like, you need to be vegan, you need to you need to just like kind of all these things that I think can be really unrealistic to have all this like pressure on yourself. And it's the same like people saying oh, go and like even in some I was going to find it, that book, because I remember you and I talked about it. It's like one of our favorite shared books, the yeah.
Oh, Melody Beattie, beige one. Yes, I love that book. I read it last night to my yoga class.
But I don't know if it's that one, but I was reading another one the other day, and sometimes the language in books about yoga and meditation can be very much like you create your reality in your thoughts. And I think when you're ill, whether it's physical, mental, both, hearing language like that can be really, like for me, quite triggering because it like invalidates what your experience is. And I feel like through yoga, you kind of, through the practice and learning, you're able to like fully feel validated and like just that whatever comes up is okay, and also like meant to be there. Like you're not imagining it.
And like making space like for that, like if you feel betrayed and you feel resentful or angry, like no one can argue with you that you feel that. And there is that positive toxic positivity of like, well, just think a better thought, and it's like, well, fuck it, I feel mad right now.
I think that's something that yoga is really good for, is like feel your feelings, like and like just come as you are, like you don't need to like I definitely used to fall into the kind of, I need to have the perfect like yoga outfit and leggings and like all the kit, and I need to be able to do all of these things that like we see on Instagram and think, you've got to be super flexible and able stand on your head, and like sometimes I still, it's a constant practice, because I still, since I've qualified as a yoga teacher, I think we talked about it once, like having that imposter syndrome, where I think to my head,
Yeah.
well, I can't do a handstand, so I'm probably not a proper yoga teacher, because, you know, and it just all of that kind of stuff that comes up is actually what it's not about, which is the kind of funny thing with it.
And speaking of that, it kind of sounds like part of your vision is like you've come along this journey of healing and you're still on this journey, and you can like take a look back at someone who's a couple steps behind and like offer something to them that maybe you didn't have when you were on that journey. So my question is, what do you bring to your yoga classes that might look or feel different to like that kind of like very asana-centered yoga class that we all have in our mind?
I think language is really important. And for me, I think yoga teachers who think that they are maybe being accessible, and, you know, like when I became ill, I wasn't a beginner because I'd done yoga previous to my ME diagnosis, but at the kind of, you have a really dysfunctional relationship with the idea of movement and exercise when you're diagnosed with something like chronic fatigue, because the two don't really, they don't go together. Like, but I wouldn't have called myself a beginner because I'd done it previously, so I knew a lot about it, but because of my kind of level, I would have been deemed a beginner. But then I would go on to kind of very prominent kind of yoga teachers online and YouTube, and I would go through their beginner classes, but they wouldn't be accepted. In their minds, they'd be accepted. But knowing my new body and connecting with other people online like me, and it's also the language. So it would be like, I don't know, you'd start a class and then it's 3 minutes in, you're in a downward facing dog, and that pose is really full on, like your whole, it's demanding. So although it's beginner and they say all levels, and it doesn't mean that it's accessible or compassionate for people with like, I know other people who, I wouldn't call them beginner because I know that they've done yoga in the past, but I know that they've got certain health conditions that would mean that some things wouldn't be right for them. And I also think a lot of classes don't use props, and there's this thing around props that's like, beginners need props, or people who can't do poses need props, or people who need help, because it's like, it adds this like less than, like, you're not good enough, you need help because you can't do this pose. If you can't do this, then try it this way. And I'm very someone said after a group class that I'm really conscious that when I'm offering different options for different poses, that it's not okay, so this is the ideal pose, but, you know, and then we're in it, and at that point, if you're already in it and then it's too much and you've got to come out, because I've been there myself, you do that mental thing of like beating yourself up because you're like, my body can't do this, and you go through that cycle. And I would not want anyone to come to a yoga class or have a yoga class with me and be feeling that. Like, I don't want it to be like, this is the pose, but if you can't do this, then try these two options. I just want it to be like, I strive to make it so that there's just a range of options, and it's very much like like, I find the term yoga teacher, which is why, like, how you say yoga practitioner, because through psychology I know that when you, and I know, I think you used to be a teacher. So,
used to be a teacher,
around
yes.
the psychology of like, as soon as you kind of give someone a label like a teacher, then you have teacher and student, you kind of, yeah, and like authority, and it's like, okay, I need to do what the teacher says, do as the teacher does. Like, I don't have authority over anyone else's body, how they're feeling, how they move.
Yeah.
And recently I gave my brother at Christmas like a 1-to-1, and I was teaching a class, and he kept looking at me, and he was really trying to mimic exactly what I was doing, and I was like, I've guided you into the pose, but I also have hypermobility, so I know that like my range compared to other people is not going to be like I'm naturally more flexible, but that's not necessarily a good thing. But it's like people think, oh, you know, you're the yoga teacher, I need to do exactly what you're doing, and yeah, and I want to make it so that that isn't the case, and that it's feeling really in tune and safe in your body, and building that trust up with it again, because I think people with chronic illness, it's so easy to, like you said on my website, especially for me, I think I'm made peace with it now, but I know that feeling of you don't trust your body because it's let you down so many times. So you kind of think, when's it going to happen again? Or like, it's like you're two separate things. Like, you're not really in your body, and you don't want to be in your body because that's too much. And like, yeah.
Right.
So
it seems like if you were feeling that way, and then also someone is saying, this is how to do this posture, then you have even less autonomy. Like, you already feel like you don't have control, and then you're handing over, or someone's taking control from you in that space.
Definitely. So yeah, I think the other thing that I would want from like, that I want to create is I love the creativity of theming, and like kind of making it known to people that they can, when I say, oh, you know, I've done my yoga practice today, more often than not, like I said, it's not the asana, the physical side of it. And you know, I still am trying to kind of come to terms with the fact that I have this image in my head that to be a yoga teacher, or to be taken seriously as a yoga teacher, I need to be doing asana every day. And I have kind of recently started to make peace with the fact that my body just can't do that. Like, if I was to do that, I wouldn't be able to teach or do other things. And actually coming back to the fact that that's like coming from a place of the old beliefs that yoga is just the physical, and it's like a workout, and it's like a exercise class kind of mindset, rather than thinking that you know, every day I would say I practice meditation, and like so many of the yamas and the niyamas are like with me every day, and so many I think could bring so much comfort to people who have chronic illness, and that's what I want to share through classes. Not necessarily, I don't know, Warrior 2 or something like that. Like, that's great, and that I love that as well. But it's all the other things that you don't see spoken about as much.
It sounds like your intention is to have your students, or the people taking your yoga class, the other yoga practitioners, leave them feeling more powerful.
I kind of want to just give them space to like feel like almost like a friend, because I've felt very lonely in the past, and like that kind of different because of being ill,
Yes.
and it is really hard when you're chronically ill from a young age. It's definitely a different experience to. So my partner has the same chronic illness, but he was diagnosed in his mid to late 20s. So I'm now just about to be the age that he was when he was diagnosed. So it's very much like two different experiences, and especially as a woman as well, like the relationship and the feelings you have that you've built up from kind of during adolescence and all of that. And then for me, with surgeries that I went through, that chronic illness can really take its toll on how you view your body, and like from an external and the internal, whether it's like, so it's just an absolute like minefield. And even if someone just came to class and needed to just lie down in shavasana and just like breathe and kind of hold space for them and like tell them that I get it, then that's a yoga practice for that. The minute it comes from someone who is in an able body and is really fit and healthy and doesn't have that experience, it veers on like kind of patronizing and very like the comment you said at the start with people who said, you know, go for a walk, and that is kind of like that. And yeah,
Well, yeah.
So yeah, I don't want any of that in my little like community.
What is one thing you wish able-bodied people in the yoga community knew?
Well, that's an interesting question. I wish they knew that I think there's more to it than especially online, because that's where most of my yoga experience comes from. That there's more than I think yoga goes beyond labeling as beginner, advanced, intermediate, and I think the minute you kind of label it like that, you're shutting it off from a whole group of like such a big, like when I was diagnosed and I created this account specifically to find other people who were disabled and had chronic illness, and it's such a big community that I hadn't had any clue of beforehand. And I just wish they could, that the kind of parameters were broadened so that it was more, because I feel like there's either again, like I said, the beginner, which and even on a good day for me, I can do an able-bodied beginner class, but that's because I've built up, and also I have that trust with my body now, and I know what my limits are, and I know I have that also the training behind me, that I feel more empowered to know that the teacher might be doing something, but if it doesn't feel right in my body, I can just sit in child's pose. Whereas years ago, I would never have done that. I would have thought, I need to do everything they're doing, and not take a break. And just also, I wish online there was more kind of like, I understand that kind of in the West as well, like to kind of spread yoga's message, it's become like watered down, but I wish more classes online, especially because that's the way that yoga is made accessible to people like me who can't go out to a gym and go to a class every week or something. I wish they would bring in more of the sort of, there's, if asana is like the one limb, all the other 7 that make up yoga. I think that would be what I would wish that they.
Language is so important, and I think those words are thrown around, especially like O levels. Like I think in the hope that they can help everybody, or like those O levels, but it sounds like using those more mindfully, or even using other words is a big piece of just making sure that it's honest and authentic and
I
compassionate.
think, like, when you said all levels, almost if you're trying to help too many people, then you might not actually be helping any, like one thing I realized from learning from doing my January classes was that I would really love to dedicate more time and energy to one-on-ones, because that's where I feel like you can fully hold the space, and I can't guarantee that a class with, like, I don't know, 5+ people, I can't make that fully accessible, because everyone's going to have different needs, and I wouldn't want them during that class to feel any of the things that I've said, like, to feel like they're not good enough, or their body's not good enough, or anything like that. Whereas when it's one-to-one and you can fully curate it, so it's completely like for them, and not just from a physical, but also like how are you emotionally this week, like how's your mental health, what do you need more of, like, all of that is yoga as well. It's not just like, I know a lot of friends online who have POTS, which means that their heart rate and kind of spikes and then drops, and they can get very dizzy. So I'm very conscious that if they were to come to a class, and if it was a more kind of active class, going from like standing to then like a forward fold or something, and then like down dog would be not good. Yeah. Like so I think that is something that's really important.
I think that's really powerful, because if you can be a supporter in helping them trust and understand the limits of their own body and mind, then when they join a group class, perhaps they'd feel more empowered to make the adjustments, changes, rests that they need without feeling so much.
I think stress. It's like the whole thing with representation, and if you don't see yourself or see someone who has had experiences like you, or then kind of where do you go from there? And even now, I think I have like, I finally, when I'd built up enough physical health, I guess, to kind of dip my toe back into the physical yoga, I maybe found like 3 yoga teachers online who I felt were kind of accessible enough for chronic illness, and compared to like the number, and they weren't even they were able-bodied, or they are able-bodied, so comparing that, there's definitely like there's a gap between. So I think it's very much like some of them that I found was very much like restorative, and only restorative or only yin, and I love that. Like, don't get me wrong, there's 100%, that's amazing, and I'm already enrolled on my advanced, which has restorative. Like, I really want to do my restorative. I just think that's such a gift as well, to be able to give to people, whether they're mentally ill or not. Like, stress and all of that. Just restorative is great. And actually for people who, you know, are kind of really busy, and like when we were talking about toxic productivity earlier, it's actually going to be harder for those people to do, or I find, like restorative or yin, where you have to be still and you have to like, you know, you can't just move through the poses and then kind of get it done. Like it doesn't work like that. But no, I found, I found that like for me, one day when I am feeling physically better, there wasn't a space where it was between this kind of beginner that was still quite like vinyasa flow, and then yoga in your bed, like very restorative. There was no middle ground, which then is very frustrating because then you feel like, you know, I can't do that one, but that one kind of makes me feel kind of crap about myself. Like makes me think of when I was in a wheelchair, and you know, and I want to move more, but no one's creating that space for me where I can and I feel safe to. So I hope that I can do that. Almost like it's almost a selfish thing, like wanting to do that for myself because I didn't have that, but also now share that with other people. Yeah.
I just got goosebumps because it's just like so beautiful. Oh, a little emotional. It is really beautiful. I'm so excited to see you grow this space and this vision because, as you know, probably better than anyone else, like that needs to be represented in this space that has kind of closed in on a certain body, a certain person, a certain aesthetic, and that limits everyone, including people who are chronically ill and people who are
it's
not
even
chronically
not just
ill.
like you take away the physical illness, and you know this from your own experiences. It's the mental health side as well, and everything that comes with that. And I'm also very conscious of like although I am chronically ill, it's I'm very conscious of fitting into that box that you see that's like woman, white, privileged in this wellness yoga space that you see so much of. So I'm very conscious of that as well, and not feeding the beast almost because
like seeing how those things intersect and interweave with each other.
Definitely.
Is there anything else you want to share with anyone listening?
Probably, it sounds really cliche because I mean it is, but just that like if anyone is listening and they are going through a hard time, whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally, that you're not alone. Because there's so many times where, and it doesn't, and I even know saying that because I've had people say it before, you kind of, you hear it, but it doesn't mean much. And you kind of, when you're in those depths, you really do feel like no one understands and there's no one to talk to and no one, but even talking to you, like anyone listening, we get it and you're not alone. And it does get better. It just takes time. And that's what I'd say.
Oh, thank you so much. Where can people find you online?
Find me on Instagram, which is at A Tired Yogi, and then my website as well, which is atiredyogi.com, which I think there's a link in my Instagram bio. Yeah.
And I will I'll tag you and put your Instagram and website in the notes of this on the podcast and on Instagram. I wanted to say thank you to everyone for joining Maddie and I on the Yoga Corner chats today. As I said, you can find all the information you need to find Maddie and what she has to offer in the caption or show notes of this episode. I am currently accepting clients into my 6-month one-on-one entrepreneurship mindset coaching program for yoga teachers. If this is something you are interested in, send me an email or Instagram message and we'll set up a clarity call. The Yoga Corner Chats replay can be found most places you listen to podcasts. I'll be publishing this episode on Monday. Please don't forget to give me a review and subscribe to my podcast so you don't miss out on future Yoga Corner Chats. Thank you so much, Maddie, for your time, for sharing your story, and for being a guest on Yoga Corner Chats.
Bye.